by the American Horticultural Therapy Association. We will be recording this webinar so that it can later be posted to YouTube for your reference, or for other individuals that you might want to direct to this exciting webinar that we're going to be running tonight. The Florida Horticulture for Health Network uses several platforms to share information as well as education, such as this webinar. They're listed on this slide. And if you would consider subscribing to the network via the website, that would be great. We send out monthly e-blasts to subscribers with upcoming webinars, as well as our recent YouTube videos, horticulture information, other interesting events related to how horticulture can positively impact health. For this webinar, we have kind of a packed evening. We will be accepting questions in the chat. So if anything comes up as you're listening to the presenters this evening, feel free to put those into the chat. And at the end of the webinar, we will get to as many of them as we can. My name's Sarah Stirling. I'm a licensed social worker and coordinator of educational horticulture at the Shipley School, which is an independent day school in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. I have the great privilege of sitting on the advisory board for the Florida Horticulture for Health Network and directing our webinar series. This evening, I am joined by two incredible co-presenters, Lesley Fleming and Zuzana Polackova. Lesley is known nationally and internationally for practicing, writing, and consulting on horticultural therapy. Her leadership roles have included initiating the Nova Scotia Horticulture for Health Network, president of the former Florida chapter of American Horticultural Therapy Association, board member and editor-in-chief of the American Horticultural Therapy Association magazine, reviewer of the Journal of Therapeutic Horticulture, editor-in-chief of Digging In and Cultivate publications, which you can receive if you join the Florida Horticulture for Health Network as a subscriber. Her ebook, Therapeutic Horticulture, A Practitioner's Perspective, was published in 2016, as long as also many other publications by Lesley. And she is currently our leader on this advisory group for the Florida Horticulture for Health Network. Zuzana Polackova is a horticultural therapy practitioner and accredited facilitator for trauma healing through the Trauma Healing Institute in the USA and Canada. She has worked with vulnerable populations for more than a decade, including substance users, victims of sex abuse and home violence, and has developed and delivered programs for vulnerable populations. Currently, she's working for Medical Ambassadors International and Medical Ambassadors Canada Association as a resource facilitator for anti-human trafficking and technical advisor for horticultural therapy. And if I missed anything, the two of them can feel free to include those when they share their activities coming up here in a few moments. So today's webinar's goals are to present you all with some unique activities. These can be used for recreation, therapeutic horticulture, horticultural therapy, as well as self-guided experiences. These can also be adapted for various populations, which all three of us will be sure to reference when we're presenting our associated activities. A really exciting component of this webinar is at the end, we're going to introduce you all to THAD, which is the Therapeutic Horticulture Activity Database. This is a free database, and we'll share more information at the end, where if you like the activities that we present today, you can get access to many, many, many more as you move through these winter months into spring and summer as well. And the biggest goal of this is to turn your winter blues green. As someone who is located in Pennsylvania, we've had a lot of storms, as I know have been happening in various other places across the country and world recently. And some upcoming snowstorms will hopefully lend themselves to plenty of indoor activity time. The activities we're hoping to cover tonight are a moss frame, a Hapa-zome print, herbal sachets, a radish seed necklace, a sowing seeds in winter activity, teacup plants, And we're going to finish with forcing paper whites and other bulbs. So to get us started is this beautiful activity called a moss frame. This is an activity I did with my kids for the first time this fall, the students at my school. I was inspired to create this activity when I happened upon a preserved moss wall at a public garden, and I immediately felt the like kind of passive benefits of being surrounded by this really beautiful big green plant space. And then I realized that this would be a plant-based activity that would result in those benefits, but that didn't require us to care for the plant material for a really long time because it uses preserved moss as opposed to live plants. When gathering the materials for this project, I want to note that this one activity can actually pretty quickly become 3 separate activities. The wooden frame that's used in this can be purchased, or depending on your client population, they could be constructed as their own separate activity. Similarly, when gathering stones, sticks, pine cones, shells, seed pods, all of the other materials that one might need to kind of make this their own for your clients, those could be collected as a separate activity in advance of this one. So you'll see the materials listed here on this slide. For each of these activities, we're using a similar format so that folks can go back and revisit the YouTube. Once this is posted, you can see the activity description, the materials for each activity, and then the therapeutic goals will be listed as well. For this specific activity, it doesn't take a lot of materials. There is the mention, though, that a hot glue gun and glue sticks or some sort of durable craft glue can both be used for this activity depending on the population. So the step-by-step instructions for this activity, usually it's best to have participants kind of lay out using various mosses, pine cones, that sort of thing. Take the opportunity before adding glue to lay out all of the various components, and they can look at these, touch them, feel them, while either learning about moss as a small and often overlooked plant material and considering which moments in life they might feel small and overlooked. So it's a really wonderful opportunity for some cognitive and intellectual and definitely emotional goals to be addressed, thinking about the sense of self and character strengths as they're starting to craft their moss frames. Once they get them laid out, it's a process of taking the either durable craft glue or a glue gun to pick up the individual pieces and glue them onto the moss frame, making sure that you're being careful with the heat of the glue gun if you're choosing to use that, or that you have a nice flat surface to work on if you're using glue that will take a while to dry, so that at the end of the activity, you can kind of lay a bit of a weighted object on top of the moss so that it will hold it in place. Again, this is a really interesting and really wonderful social therapeutic activity where conversations related to feeling small, feelings of inadequacy can come up, and those feelings can really be normalized through conversation with the group. The next activity that I'm excited to share is called a Hapa-zome. This literally means leaf dye. The Hapa-zome is an activity that I discovered while I was exploring natural dye techniques for use with my students. This has been a favorite activity for students with a wide range of ages when I've worked with them. And Hapa-zome is a Japanese printmaking technique that uses the natural pigments or dyes to create prints on either fabric or paper. This is another activity that has the potential to be multiple activities, which I always think that bonus activities are a great a great moment. And there is the opportunity for participants to be the ones to collect the flowers, the leaves, and other plant material used for this printing. When I did this activity with my students at the point at which these images were taken, we were approaching fall. We were able to go out on our campus and find a lot of very dye-rich plant material, chrysanthemums, geraniums. Some had even found that some of the changing leaves on campus, especially maples and others, lended themselves to some pretty nice fabric dyeing and printing. So for this activity, you're going to need to collect various flowers, especially if you do a little bit of research ahead of time to make sure that there's success by choosing plant material that are rich with dye. You should use either light colored paper or a light colored natural fabric. So linen, I have found, works very, very well as well, and hemp and jute, those work the best. Cotton is okay, but it doesn't quite have the same absorbency as the other fabrics that were mentioned. We use rubber mallets for this activity, where you literally lay out the plant material onto whatever you're working with, and you use mallets to hammer the plant material in place. This is something that I just want to make note of, because there might be adaptations that you want to use for this activity for students who are, for clients who are either sensitive to noises. And it's also one of the benefits of this activity is that it can help with some of the self-regulation or becoming more sensitized to loud noises, kind of hammering things. I've had students who use their hands to hold the papers in place. Another adaptation that works great for various populations is to use rulers or chopsticks for them to hold the paper and fabric in place when they're hammering the plant material, so that they better miss their fingers. That way makes it a little bit of a safer activity. So for this one, I found it really interesting because there are definitely cultural lessons and conversations that came up unexpectedly when we were talking about kind of like the purpose and background of Hapa-zome prints and the history of them. It's a really great educational activity, which I think is an important aspect of horticulture that's not always considered when we're thinking about cognitive and intellectual goals, in connecting with nature on a different level than it's just passively, as understanding the many connections that humans have with plants, including them as materials for our dye. This is a really great physical therapeutic activity, exercises fine motor skills. Definitely a lot of hand-eye coordination here, and builds muscle control. Again, this can be a very loud activity. And so keeping that in mind if you're planning on doing this with specific populations is really important. This is also a really wonderful olfactory sensory activity, because when the plants are crushed, you get to experience them in a different way or at a different level of olfactory stimulation than what I think you do when you're just kind of rubbing or working with the similar plants. And you'll see, I'm about to turn things over to Lesley Fleming, but the results of this activity, which have been pictured here, are also something that I've used as a primary fabric for the next activity that Lesley's going to present you with, which you'll get to see in this next picture. When you get a good print, it can be really nice to use with herbal sachets. Lesley, it's all you.
Thanks, Sarah. So I am going to talk about herbal sachets and share a few tips. One of the best things is that there are a number of activities that use herbs like lavender or rosemary, rose petals, and chamomile to make fragrant sachets or dresser drawer bags. Now, my personal favorite is a dream pillow, which is a larger version of the others, of a larger version of sachets. So these would use fabric cotton bags, which really all of these are using. Okay, so next slide. In a prior session or part of your current session, make individual sachet bags with herbs, and the materials are listed on the screen so you can see those. It's a pretty long list. Participants help measure the herbs. The facilitator adds essential oils. Be careful with some populations, and I really think the facilitator should handle the essential oils. Participants can shake to mix the herbs, enjoy the sounds of the herbs, and then put them into the sachets. Now, take time to talk and to smell the herbs, and that is, part of the sensory experience. To make a dream pillow, use a 6x6 fabric bags for the outer layer. And what you do is you insert the smaller fabric sachet bags into the pillow when it's half full of pillow stuffing. Put this fragrant sachet in and then finish filling with stuffing and sew or Velcro closed. Okay, what makes herbal sachets a therapeutic horticulture activity? That's a large part of what we're talking about here. The herbs, of course, plus therapeutic goals appropriate for the population. So let me talk a bit about this. For senior dementia groups, practice following sequential steps works on cognitive function. And if this is done in a group setting, working collaboratively by passing materials or taking turns shaking or stirring herb mixture, helping to hold the sachets open for filling with herbs, or discussing olfactory preferences like, do you like rosemary or do you like lavender better? These can be integrated into sessions. For most populations, they can benefit from learning relaxation techniques, and that could include smelling aromatherapy fragrances or practice of sitting quietly with fragrant dream pillow to calm themselves, establishing a sleep ritual of using dream pillows, smelling the herbs, of course, counting to aid in relaxed state prior to sleep. So you can see the therapeutic goals in the primary health domains. That's on the current slide. So a few more comments. Oops, maybe go back. This one's a little bit longer. A few more comments re therapeutic horticulture use of this activity. Some facilities will not allow essential oils and they can be strong. So use gloves when handling. I think I mentioned the facilitator should be the only one using them. That will depend on your population, of course. And make sure once they are dripped into the herb mixture that clients do not touch them directly. Now, some clients may have olfactory smelling deficits. So you want to warn about strong smells, and you really need to be prepared for some who cannot smell herbs. This, in fact, may signal other health issues, and really this should be mentioned to staff as a follow-up. Now, always watch for items being put into mouths. Herbal sachets have small bits. If you're working with people living with dementia, I think you want to make the group smaller so that you have adequate slash slow close supervision. And I would say this activity is wonderful for all populations. Well, maybe not for incarcerated males, but it can prompt discussions about self-care, natural remedies, aromatherapy to improve mood or relaxation, and using plants to instill hope, positivity, and creative expression. And these really are appropriate for at-risk youth or people with pain, people with arthritis, eating disorders, or trauma, for example. Pillows can be hand painted with fabric paints prior to filling with herbs and stuffing to expand opportunities for creative expression. And herbs can be grown in a program's garden. So there's lots of ways to expand and extend this type of activity. I have just a few more points and I'll try and talk quickly here. There are quite a number of herb activities and 3 sachet dream pillows and herbal heating bags. And can I quickly share some information on herbal heating bags? Use buckwheat seeds mixed with dried lavender, lemon balm, or peppermint, plus the essential oils made into a bag like the dream pillow, or use a sock. And because the heating bags are using buckwheat seeds, they can be microwaved or frozen to aid with muscle pain. Now, there is something additionally wonderful about the tactile sense of running your fingers through the buckwheat, preferably before the essential oils are added. But I have to say, buckwheat seeds are a bit more expensive, so plan for this in your program's budget. Good. Okay, so the next I get to talk about radish seed necklaces. Do you need some oomph in your sessions? So I think you should consider plant jewelry, which you can really infuse with humor. So I recommend radish seed necklaces. This therapeutic horticulture activity can combine a germination hands-on activity with creative expression. And modeling Tiffany-like jewelry and enhancing the mood using humor is lots of fun for both the therapist and the participants. So make a sample necklace ahead and wear it and prance around, loosening up the crowd slash your participants. So the step-by-step process is relatively easy and appropriate for all populations. Note that seeds are very small. So if you're working with people living with dementia, this may be a bit of a challenge handling them or the temptation to put seeds in your mouth. So you have to decide if this will work for you and your clients. So this next slide shows materials list, and on the top right photo, the basic components. Each person labels their zip bag, then wets a cotton ball, not themselves, hopefully, though this might happen when hands get wet with warm water. You people know what populations I'm talking about. So then the cotton ball is dipped into a bowl of water, then put into the zip bag. The next step is that the leader typically places several radish seeds onto the cotton ball, taking time to ensure that the client sees the seeds against the white cotton ball. And you can see they are quite noticeable in the slide here. So then the bags are zipped closed, poke a hole through the bag. I usually use pencils, or the participants use pencils, string the red yarn to make a necklace and put them on. So let's talk about therapeutic goals. Cognitive intellectual goals. Gear this to the group, of course. This can include learning about germination or seed types, greenhouse concepts, following sequential steps, or a simple concept of plant growth with visual observation of seeds and sprouts or transplants. Physical goals, that includes working hand dexterity and pincer grip, handling materials, which I've identified, printing the name on the bags, closing the zip bag, handling the wet cotton ball, and practicing nurturing skills and sense of responsibility, watching the seeds grow. These are in the psychological domain. Now, sensory goals, tolerate cool water on hands. Yes, that is a goal for some populations. Listen to the seeds of sounds in the packets. And, there are more, as you can see on the screen, therapeutic goals, but I'm not going to go through them all. As a group activity, if you want to increase the physical activity, I've mentioned walk around, prance around, model your radish seed necklace as if it's Tiffany jewelry, and walk through the activity area and down the halls. I've done this and it's lots of fun. And the whole point is, as the therapist or facilitator, you've got to start by exaggerating the movements and having fun. When we infuse fun, it's fun for everybody. Um, so I also suggest have real radishes, a variety of seed packages, shaking them for sounds. That can be part of the prancing around. Taste the radishes. And of course, this would be with prior approval from staff for health, allergy, or swallowing issues. At the end of this session, I typically tape the necklaces to a window, an outside window, to hasten germination and to provide platforms really for observing the seeds sprouting. Now, this greenhouse zip bag can bring the light to all ages and abilities, and the germination occurs in about 3 days. Sprouts are viable for about at least a week in the sealed zip bag. And then at that point, I think you probably want to move on and do another activity with them. You can extend this activity by combining it with the water cycle bracelets with beads and jute for a plant jewelry themed session, which I've done, or transplant the germinated seeds into containers or gardens in subsequent sessions. Or you can include different types of radishes like black radishes and different shape radishes, which you see on the screen here. And these can be metaphors for tolerance, which is people and plant come in all shapes and sizes. Good. Okay, so I'd like to pass the screen and the session over to Zuzana.
Hello, everybody. Lovely to seeing you, or at least this one on online. I would love to share with you a couple of the activities I have practiced, and one of them is winter sowing. I love winter sowing. One of the activities which I find I usually work with people or female mainly. Where I started this activity, I was working with female who were suffering from substance abuse and sexual abuse. And when I kind of introduced the winter sowing, everybody gives you this crazy look. And I think it was just amazing because their lives are kind of crazy and people look at them, oh my gosh, what's going on and the pain they go through. And they really, really could relate to this activity. And that's why I wanted to share here, because it is maybe population you are working with. And I really find that the people could, and the women especially, could really relate it. If you go to the next slide, what is it? It is basically planting the seeds to the old milk jugs. I'm using the 4 liters. I think that's 2 gallons, if I'm right. And you just cut the bottle, curls along, keep it just holding together with the handle, and make sure you drill a couple holes. You can drill it, or you can just use it nails, and you can just pierce it on the top of the lid and on the bottom, which will help us to create something like microclimate or little greenhouse, where we have extra moisture coming out on the bottom and needed moisture coming from the air inside the bottle. Then we use little bit of seeds. There we need to use seeds which are hardy seeds. This will be predominantly brassica group. That can be beetroot. There can be also some blooming flowers like tagates, and so many different plants. It depends what are you using it as, what's your therapeutic use. After we put the seeds in, we gently press the compost or the growing substrate which we are using and water it, seal it with the waterproof tape, and then we can just bring it outside and leave it in the snow. And that is, I think, the most strangest things that people look at you when you just bring all these little seeds in the soil, in the snow, and you just leave it there till it's the time to sow the seeds, and they looks fantastic. You have strong seedlings which don't need to winterize. And yeah, it's really fun activity. If you look at the benefits of winter sowing, there is several therapeutic goals, but only one which I really would like to use or to share with you. It's really looking at growing those little seeds in these harsh conditions and identifying, as you're working with the participants, what conditions those seeds need. And you can really open conversation for self-identity, self-needs and wants, and bringing the participants who might experience trauma back to the reality by touching the seed soil and follow the step-by-step instructions, which also helps them in their concentrations. And they need to work in the teams. That is also great activity for social interaction. But I want to really make sure that you will be aware of the abilities of your participants, especially when you're working with the elderly population. And when you are cutting the boxes, maybe I would pre-cut them. When you're working with little seeds, maybe I choose the bigger seeds. And the population I had been working with, substance abuse, recovering women in addiction, it's important to know what stage of recovery they are, because at the early stage of recovery, they don't have really steady hands. The hands can be really shaky, and their vision can be also blurry, and medication have so many side effects. And it's just important, if you want to really use this activity, that you embrace all the needs of your community or the group of you are working with. It's also an amazing activity for encouraging participants to creating healthy coping mechanism, especially when they become frustrated, when they cannot cut properly the bottle, or maybe the tape doesn't work exactly as they want. You really can help them identify their need, their emotional need, how they can cope with it, and what they are experiencing, and whatever stage they are, and connecting that to the nature. And speaking about creating a small micro greenhouse for the plants, we can help identify what's the safe place and for the plants, and also for what is the safe place for the participants. And yeah, this is really good activity. You can do it in a couple people in the group, or you can do it in bigger group. And I just find it really, really helpful. And you can see the other benefits there. The next one is teacups. Teacups, I love teacups activities. It is creative, it's cute as well, and yeah, it's very simple activity. And actually you can make it very simple where you're using teacups and materials and you just plant. Or if you want to use it a little bit more challenging, or you have different therapeutic goals, you can use also drill holes in those teacups. And I got sometime, or most of my group, I got the activity that I always have people who wanted experience the challenge of drilling, and especially women. I had been working, when you give them this powerful tool of drill and these tiny teacups, which is very fragile, and they really need to be careful but also strong to drill these holes. And after they did it, they have new experience. They were able to do something they didn't know before. They learned how to use drill. And yeah, they felt really empowered, especially for the participants I had been working. There is still the gender role kind of separation, that certain things are men jobs and certain things are female jobs. And they really felt that they actually entered the male jobs, and they were very happy that they could do it. And that also increased their self-worth, self-esteem, and they have new ideas how they can use the skills they just received, and it was really amazing to watch them, how they support each other, even when the cup was broken or something happened, we pick up another cups, and they were really encouraging each other. And it was, yeah, it was amazing activity. And simply choosing the teacup and plant gives a great opportunity to talk about identity, meaning in life, and gives the therapists encourage the participants to explore their meaning in life and spirituality. And same as any other horticulture therapy and therapeutic horticulture activities, there are several goals which we can meet by creating these lessons on many levels, to allow the expression of beauty, not only by seeing it, but by creating it. Allows participants explore self-awareness, self-esteem, self-worth. This activity is not suitable for early stage of substance abuse, as I mentioned before, as they often do not have steady hands, and then medication creates blurry vision and inability to concentrate. And if you are working with the elderly people or children, I would encourage you to not use the drill at all. I will just let the teacups your pot and use them as they are. And on the other hand, it is a fantastic lesson for those who need to practice steadiness in their hands or develop a great awareness of tactile differences and the other therapeutic goals you have here on the slides. And now I would ask Sarah if she can continue with the next session.
Thank you, Lesley and Zuzana, so much. I think I could listen to you talk about activities all evening if we had the time. The last activity that I wanted to share is an activity of forcing paper whites and other bulbs. So where I'm located, right outside of Philadelphia, we experience the not very snowy winter, but definitely a cold winter. And so for bulbs like daffodils, narcissus, and tulips, and hyacinth that require a chill before blooming, this is a great winter planting activity where the real growth of the plant and the activity is happening indoors, but it happens over a much longer period of time. So about 6 years ago, I acquired the role as chair of exhibits for our school's participation in the Philadelphia Flower Show. This was before I knew anything about therapeutic horticulture. And when I was forcing bulbs with my students, they always left in such a better mood. They always felt so spirited. They always felt like they were so successful when they were turning these little bulbs from bulbs into these really big, beautiful, spectacular flowers. And this activity is actually the one thing that initiated my interest in therapeutic horticulture. So I hope that many of you will take advantage of using this activity to help kind of inspire and motivate your activities. So bulb forcing takes a bit of horticulture knowledge by the person who's leading the activity. You have to know which bulbs can actually be used for forcing bulbs in the winter time. So the ones that I had mentioned, paper white bulbs, which are narcissus, paperwhites actually do not require a cooling period, and so they can be a really useful bulb if that's not something that exists near you. But bulbs that do require a period of cold, like tulips, like hyacinth, and other narcissus bulbs, they can be cooled in a refrigerator or freezer or if need be. You can also buy pre-cooled bulbs wholesale, which makes them a little bit more affordable. And so acquiring the bulbs takes a little bit of pre-planning, and making sure you're using the right materials for this activity is important for the instructor, leader, therapist to know about. For this activity, you also need to know which direction bulbs get pointed. So they have a pointy part that points up, and they have a flat, sometimes rooted, slightly rooted bottom. But usually when you're getting bare bulbs, you will just see, as you see on the picture on the left, they look pretty similar to onions. My students often try to peel them like onions, and I tell them they should not do that because they need the protective coating on them. But there's a pointy part that points up, and there's a flat part that points down, which will become the root system for these. You can use various pots. You can use plastic or terracotta pots for this activity in assorted sizes, depending on the size of your bulbs. The image on the left are grape hyacinth, and so that is a very tiny pot packed with grape hyacinth bulbs. Your participants will put a small amount, about an inch of soil in the bottom of a pot, or 2 inches if you're using a larger pot and larger bulbs. They will pack as carefully as they can and as tightly as they can the bulbs facing the right direction into the pot, and then cover that with soil. For us, we create almost like an artificial pit, we call it, but an underground experience for those bulbs right outside of the greenhouse, where we just take the pots of bulbs, we line them all up on the ground, we cover them with about 2 feet of leaf material, which is collected from honestly drive by grabbing people's leaf mulch from their disposal near the trash bins at the front of their houses, and we dump all that on top. They stay in that cold condition for several weeks, and then the magic begins. So when you bring these bulbs inside, you water them. When you first bring them in, sometimes there's a little bit of a bulb kind of peeking up. Sometimes there's a little bit of growth peeking up from the top of it. And so there's many conversations that can be had with students about, did they do this right? What to expect? With the population that I'm working with, there's oftentimes a lot of conversations of inadequacy or worry that they're going to do this wrong or that they're going to do something wrong. And so this activity is always wonderful because it every time results in success, as long as the therapist has done their pre-planning with using the right types of bulbs. When we see this dramatic growth of plants and then a bud and then a bloom, you can always use wooden stakes and string as an additional activity to kind of stake up or keep the plants upright, because some of the taller flowers like to kind of tip over. There's the opportunity to top dress, which is just when you're covering the soil to make it look nice, with either moss or small petals. And so again, you can see that over a period of time, this one activity can turn into many more. And it certainly takes more than just, it's not a single day activity. So for anyone who works with populations that really appreciates the experience of growing plants from seeds, bulb forcing is definitely an activity that you should try. I've worked with themes of dormancy and rest as a necessity for growth and wellness, which falls under the psychological and emotional therapeutic goals. Definitely thinking about the olfactory engagement of these beautiful flowers in full bloom. They tend to be very fragrant flowers, especially plants like hyacinth. There's a couple safety considerations that I will make note of, which is that some bulbs, when you purchase them, they're actually treated with antifungals that can cause skin irritation. And some people naturally have like dermatitis reaction to hyacinth bulbs. And so this is an activity that is a good one to have everybody, just for safety's sake, wear some sort of rubber gloves when they're doing this activity. So gloves are important. I really think that the olfactory engagement in this activity is the highest of any I've ever seen, because if you have other clients or other participants, or even just other therapists who are walking into the room where all of these bulbs have bloomed, they always comment on the smell and appreciate the smell. And if that can happen when the clients are in the room, they kind of get an extra boost of pride for having achieved such a wonderful thing. So that wraps up the indoor activities part of this webinar, but I'm very, very excited to introduce you all to a free resource that has many, many more activities, indoor, outdoor, everywhere in between. THAD, which stands for Therapeutic Horticulture Activities Database, is a collaborative project which was initiated by Diane Ralph and the Therapeutic Horticulture Activity Database, THAD, working group. This group includes the Florida Horticulture for Health Network, Nova Scotia Horticulture for Health Network, California Horticultural Therapy Network, the Mid-Atlantic Horticultural Therapy Network, Carolinas Horticultural Therapy Network, and the University of Florida Certificate in Horticultural Therapy, which many of you might be parts of those groups. And if you are, we really thank you for your activity that you might be submitting for the THAD, as well as your participation in this webinar. So you should check this out. Bree, are you able to put, I can try to put this in when I get off, but are you able to put that link, that direct link, into the chat at all?
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome, thank you. We have a bit of time, which is wonderful, to be able to answer some questions. I'm going to stop screen sharing for the moment so that all presenters can kind of turn their cameras back on as well. And then we'll jump back to the screen momentarily. So if Lesley and Zuzana, you're willing to turn your cameras back on, we can hopefully answer some questions. So if folks have questions about any of the activities we presented on, about adaptations for specific populations, about ideas for specific populations, we would love to hear them. I can see in the meeting chat, Lisa says the THAD database is amazing. I've printed out so many activities. I love it. So thank you for that feedback, Lisa. Cliff, I see your question. Would watercolor paper work fine for the Hapa-zome activity? Absolutely. This would work really well for the activity. In fact, I would add that when you're using paper, if it feels like you're not really getting the results that you want, or even with fabric, you can wet the paper or fabric. And sometimes the dyes actually absorb into, especially the paper, a little bit better when it's moistened.
Is Zuzana gonna jump on? Zuzana might be having internet slow down. but if she can unmute
I
and
think
join
they were
us.
expecting a storm, so we'll see. And Bree, if you're getting any messages on your side, because sometimes they don't all come to us, feel free to jump in and let us know about questions.
We did have one that somebody was asking. Jennifer Hamlin wanted to know what type of frame was recommended for the moss frame and like what kind of shadow box and all that.
Great. A very lightweight one, which when I've been acquiring frames, I often for this activity, when I've built them, I've used, for various sizes, different types of wooden backing, but the cheapest that I have found, are at craft stores like Joann Fabrics or Michael's in the US, where I can get a frame for less than $1. So you can get like a box of these, usually about 6" by 6" frames, which work really well for this activity, and they're super lightweight. And so when they have the moss and everything added to them, they're still light enough to very easily move around and hang as well. Oh, hi, Carolyn. Sarah, does the dye wash off of the fabric if it's laundered? Yes, it does. So if you are planning to launder fabric that you're dyeing, you have to go through several processes. There's many steps. There's very specific plant dyes that work much better. I can't remember what it's called when you have to like prepare the fabric right now. It's the word's escaping me. But there's many things that you have to do. So this is not an activity that you want to use the Hapa-zome and then plan to get a lot of wear out of the fabric. It's definitely something that would be something that the results you might want to hang them up in a room or frame them or use them as we did for the herbal sachets, like in the image for Lesley's presentation.
I'm going to jump in here while people maybe are putting questions in the chat box. I think we, delivering this webinar, have made a commitment to write all of these activities up for THAD. Several of them are already in THAD, and I think that we will be able to write all of these activities up. So, you can look forward to getting additional information. Sarah, you did a nice job of setting up the PowerPoint and sharing a lot of the key information that will be included in THAD for each of the activities.
Thank you. I have a wonderful question from Michael, and I will give you my answer after I say it, but Lesley, I would love to hear yours. And Zuzana's writing that her internet is bad. And so if you're here and you just can't get in video, you can always feel free to put things in the chat, Zuzana. So Michael had written, if working with migrant and refugee populations, would there be a particular exercise that you feel most called to? When I think about the activities that I had presented on, I definitely lean toward the moss frame just because of the initial conversation about moss. It's actually a fascinating plant. It's so necessary. It's so overlooked. And I feel like many different populations, but specifically immigrant refugee populations, I think might have that sense about themselves, a sense of like needing to be small for various safety reasons or feeling very small. And so when they're able to take something that's often overlooked and create a really beautiful masterpiece and make that the centerpiece, I think that that could be a really meaningful activity. Lesley, do you have other ideas?
Well, I do. And I guess one thought, if you want me to comment on the activities that are included in this presentation, I think that the radish seed necklace, which of course I'm partial to, would be a fun activity for people who have recently immigrated or refugee to a new country, because they can then take it home and share with their children. So I think that that can be fun. Let's extend what we're doing with some of the participants. Now, I just wrote a few days ago an activity for THAD, and it's called Eating Plant Parts. And I wrote it specifically for immigrant and refugee individuals and populations, with the focus of nutrition and also sharing of cultural food traditions. So the idea is that the participants would identify vegetables or fruits from their home countries. And the group would talk about these, hopefully be able to taste them. And some of the vegetables and fruits in their new country that they may not be as familiar with would also be included in this tasting. And what plant parts are we eating? Because when we're new to fruits or vegetables, edibles, we don't always know what parts we're supposed to eat. So this is a nice way to do knowledge transfer, to welcome people to a new country, to acknowledge that they have expertise as well. So it's a full circle moment. So that would be one activity. And I don't think it's published on that yet, but it should be by the end of January.
Zuzana, did you
Yeah.
hear that question, and do you have an answer for Michael as well?
Yeah, well, yes, I hear it, and actually, I love both of your answers. It's fantastic. And yeah, I was just thinking, it depends where the refugee camp also is, and what's your therapeutic goals. If part of your therapeutic goal is also nutrition value, and again, the radish seeds necklaces are just, Lesley was saying, it's fantastic. It's easy to do. You don't need any extra space. It's amazing. But I also love, doesn't need to be necessarily winter sowing, even like bottle sowing, because usually they are not gardens. Usually there is not space where you can have fresh vegetables. And usually they are eating, canned food and something might be nutritionally deprived. And I think even just growing lettuce, which would not be necessarily always suitable for winter sowing, but you can grow them in Coca-Cola bottle. Sorry if I advertise any plastic bottle or anywhere. And, you can have amazing fresh vegetables just there on your table anytime with no space, no need for garden. You can put them on the roof. And, and in a way you educate your children as well, because children love to observe, and they like to see the plants growing. And then I think, yeah, the amazing questions, and I think there will be so many different answers. But yeah, it's amazing that you are even interested in that population. That's fantastic.
We have a couple questions or comments related to safety. So I had a question, do all bulbs tend to have the antifungal treatment, or was that one bulb in particular? Hyacinths tend to be the ones that are most commonly treated with antifungals because they are most susceptible to rot when they're in the soil or in a moist environment. I've found tulips to be the least likely. So if that's helpful information to you, I'm happy to share that. Holly Marone had written that for the Hapa-zome, which she's done before, they use a brayer, so the printmaking roller tool instead of hammers, and that has worked well for the safety needs of their inpatient psychiatric settings. So that's wonderful comment. And then Lesley had a question. Can you speak a little bit more to the dangers of handling essential oils with direct skin contact? So is that all essential oils? Are there some that you would want to be more aware of than others?
Well, I think you want to err on the side of safety. So some people are going to have, they're going to be more sensitive to their skin. So if it were me, I would always wear non-latex gloves. And I think that one of the safety points I made was if you're dripping the essential oils into the potpourri that you're going to use for sachets, don't have your participants put their hands right on it. You may have to mix that up a little bit. So I don't, I wouldn't identify one stronger than others, probably, but I think, just be safe and consider them all. Someone in your group is probably going to have some sensitivities.
Jessica Sullivan had written that citrus oils can really irritate many people, which, yeah, absolutely. I have another comment that as a biophilic artist that works with moss, there are many interesting things about moss, so I'm grateful for this comment. It's also been used in bandages and diapers and as insulation. It has natural antibiotic properties. It's edible. Yes, there's recipes online. Something so small makes such a big impact in many ways. So yay for using moss in therapeutic horticulture activities. I love the moss fan club that's happening. Bree, are you seeing any questions, or Lesley or Zuzana, do either of you have any?
Well, I just want to make a comment. We're not purporting that you eat moss. And I think if you're using that, you need to do, pretty rigorous research on that. I don't doubt whoever shared that comment, but like any of the products that we're using, we have to be very careful, especially if they're going to be ingested or touched.
So I want to wrap
Hey,
up.
Hey,
Oh, go
Sarah,
ahead, Bree.
we had one more question.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Somebody was asking, aside from that, what are other good resources to utilize when creating therapeutic activities?
Well, I would say the number one is taking courses. Some of the HT certificate courses, and they're readily available in all countries really now. We would be more familiar with the ones in the US, but I see that there are participants from Canada. I see a participant from Japan. So yeah, really you can't deliver any of the activities as therapeutic horticulture without training. So that would be the number one. There are other sites, certainly the Florida Horticulture for Health Network. We have the Resource Hub, and we have, I think, 8 or 9 different categories. Some are by population, some are landscapes for health. So I think that's a good resource. Then there's Kids Gardening. That's a good online source. Sarah, do you know of some educational programs more geared to education?
I think the ones that you've mentioned, there's a fantastic conference, but it's not as much therapeutic horticulture
yes.
based. But certainly if
Right.
you're working with children, the American Horticultural Society every year in the summer hosts the National Children and Youth Gardening Symposium, which is wonderful, a wonderful way to connect with other people who are working with children. And there do tend to be a lot of activities, maybe not specifically identified as therapeutic horticulture, but they're happening there. I think that the THAD has done a wonderful job, or will continue to do a wonderful job of filling in where there's not really a great, like, one go-to resource.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead,
sorry.
Zuzana.
I just wanted to emphasize what Lesley said. Yeah, I am from Slovakia, living in Canada, and there is so many different networks you can join. But this one, which we are part of today, like there is so many resources which you can read and educate yourself. But I always would emphasize, because you are working with emotions, physical abilities, and the wholeness of the person, you want to study and equip yourself the highest way you can. And certificates and anything, it's not just for the paper having certificates, but it's really for the empowering yourself, that what you do, you are the best in it, to helping the person in front of you and to grow with the person as you are practicing the therapeutic horticulture or horticulture therapy. I just would emphasize it so much, so much. I did my certificate later, before I was just kind of doing gardening, and I did not know how much I really missed out, how much more nature offered to us, and all these techniques. Then I would just emphasize, if you have the opportunity, there are free courses if you cannot afford the paid one, but really, please just go and take advantage of everything what you can find.
The
Right.
last two mentions were Root in Nature, which is a great resource. And there's some great youth activities in the Extension 4-H activity books as well. This is the reminder page that you all can subscribe to the Florida Horticulture for Health Network. And a big thank you to the American Horticultural Therapy Association for co-hosting this awesome webinar with us, and a big thanks to all of you for attending. Next up on our docket next month. So at Florida Horticulture for Health Network, we really believe that another great way to learn about horticultural therapy programs is by having visits or inspiration from different programs around the country. So on Tuesday, February 6th, and you can get more information about this and register on the Florida Horticulture for Health Network website, we are going to be hosting Inspiration from Loveland Youth Gardeners, Tuesday, February 6th. This is going to be a 1 p.m. Eastern Time webinar. Loveland Youth Gardeners is a Northern Colorado nonprofit and youth-led urban farm dedicated to improving the lives of youth by building healthy relationships with people, the environment, and the community. The webinar will be presented by Erica Wharton, who's a horticultural therapist and program director at Loveland Youth Gardeners. I want to give a big final thank you to both Lesley and Zuzana for your co-presenting and your wonderful knowledge, and as well as Jessica and Bree for helping with the webinar. So thanks you all, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Have a wonderful evening.